A very good morning, dear students. Welcome to e-learning classes of Sacred Hearts of the subject Economics. Dear students, in the previous lecture of Economics, we were on the chapter Government Budget and the Economy, and we have started the topic Budget Deficit. We have discussed the meaning of budget deficit. It is a particular situation when the expenditures of government budget are higher than the budget receipts. Thereafter, we have discussed that there can be three possible conditions of budget deficit. It can be revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, and primary deficit. In the previous lecture, we have discussed about the revenue and fiscal deficit. What was the revenue deficit? It is a situation when the revenue expenditures of the government were higher than the revenue receipts, having the different implication to cut down the expenditure by the government, to raise its borrowings, or compel for the disinvestment. After that, we have discussed about the fiscal deficit, and it was a situation of excess of total expenditure over total receipts other than the borrowings. That means in receipts we are not including the borrowings. And it was also having the multiple implications. The very first implication was the inflationary spiral. Then there was national debt. Thereafter, vicious circle of high fiscal deficit and the low GDP growth. Next was the crowding out, in which very less amount of investment is left out for the private entrepreneurs. And the last one, that is the erosion of government credibility. Today we are going to discuss about the primary deficit, its implications. Thereafter we are going to just see an illustration how to calculate all the deficit. Thereafter balanced and unbalanced budget, and the chapter will be winded up today only. So let's get started. The very first is the meaning of primary deficit. So dear student, what is the primary deficit? It is the difference between the fiscal deficit and interest payment. Now see, primary deficit indicates government borrowings on account of current year expenditure and current year receipts of the government. What does the primary deficit used to tell? Primary deficit used to tell the borrowings requirement of the government for the current year. And what is the formula? The formula is primary deficit is equals to fiscal deficit minus interest payment. And what are the different implications? Just see over here. Implications of primary deficit are similar those to the fiscal deficit, because fiscal deficit also tell about the borrowings and primary deficit also tell about the borrowings. So most of the implications are same. What is the difference? The difference is that the primary deficit does not carry the load of interest payment. In primary deficit, there is no amount of borrowings there for the payment of interest. Only it used to indicate the current year's borrowing requirement. No burden of the past year borrowings interest is there. Now just see an illustration is here, and through this illustration we are going to calculate the revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, and primary deficit. Very first, revenue deficit formula is revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts. So you are given with the revenue expenditure amount. You can see that it is the second point, the revenue expenditure. Thereafter the revenue receipt is the first point. So we will minus the value of 16,82,107 crore from the value of 23,49,618 crore. So we will get the revenue deficit of 6,67,500 crore. Thereafter the fiscal deficit, total expenditure that is given in the sixth point, minus total receipts other than the borrowing. So total receipts are also given over here. Total receipts are at the fifth point, and out of that we are going to deduct the eighth point, that is the borrowings. Then we will get the fiscal deficit of 9,35,635 crore. And the last, the primary deficit, the formula is fiscal deficit that have been calculated just now. Will out of that the interest payment will be deducted, and interest payment is the ninth point in the illustration. So we will deduct 6,11,036 crore from the 9,35,635 crore, and we will get the answer 3,24,599 crore. It is the primary deficit. So in this way the different type of deficit can be calculated. Now the next topic, that is a balanced and unbalanced budget. When the balance budget will be balanced, so when the government expenditures and receipts will be equal, that will be the condition of balanced budget. And what can be the merits? The very first, that government will not be involved in any of the wasteful activity. The second one, a balanced budget shows the financial stability. It shows the financial smoothness and stability. But there are some demerits as well. The very first, because it doesn't provide any solution to one of the drastic economic problem, that is unemployment. And the second one, the balanced budget is not conducive to growth in less developed countries. In the context of the less developed countries, there is requirement of more and more expenditures. If more expenditures are not there, that means it is something somewhere the lack of infrastructure. Now the next one is the unbalanced budget. So when the government expenditure and receipts will not be equal, it will be the situation of unbalanced budget. And unbalanced budget can be the surplus budget and the deficit budget. Initially we will discuss the surplus budget. So it is a budget in which the government receipts are greater and government expenditures are comparatively less. See the equation. Surplus budget is equals to budget receipts are greater than budget expenditures. And what are the merits of the surplus budget? The very first, that it used for the solution of the inflation. At the time of inflation it is used. Second, surplus budget plugs the inflationary gap. So whatever the inflationary situations are there, they are taken by the surplus budget. What are the demerits? If we talk about the demerits, then surplus budget decreases the level of aggregate demand, and so it is not desired at the time of depression. And the last demerit, decrease in aggregate demand ultimately decreases the level of employment, or we can say increases the level of unemployment in the economy. Now the deficit budget. If we talk about the deficit budget, then it is a particular situation when the government expenditures are high and government receipts are less. So equation can be concluded accordingly. What are the merits? The very first, this instrument is used for correcting the situation of depression by increasing more and more of aggregate demand. And the second, it also enhances the level of employment in the economy. But it is also having some demerits. The very first, it is not desired during the time of inflation, because it will all more enhance the situation of inflation or worsen the situation of inflation. And the second one, inflationary gap reduces wage price spiral, induces. And if the inflation will be there, then there will be a wage price spiral, which will ultimately increases the prices due to wage and wages due to prices. So this is all about today, as well as about the chapter. Today we have discussed about the primary deficit, its formula, implication. Thereafter we have discussed an illustration to calculate the different type of deficits, and thereafter we have discussed about the balanced and unbalanced budget along with implication, merits, demerits and formulas. God bless you all.